Welcome to the Lead Well podcast. Around here, we believe leadership shouldn't cost you your peace, your well-being, or the parts of yourself you've worked so hard to reclaim. I'm your host, Trasetta Washington, leadership wellness coach and strategist. And my mission is to give you practical, actionable steps to reduce overwhelm, lead more effectively, and build a sustainable rhythm for both your team and your life. Let's dive into today's conversation. Hey leaders, welcome back to the Lead Well podcast. Today I want to talk about delegation, but probably not in the way that you're used to hearing it talked about, because most of the time when delegation comes up, it's framed as a time management issue or a productivity fix. Like if you just hand off more tasks, then everything will magically feel lighter. And that actually hasn't been my experience at all. What I've noticed, especially working with leaders who care very deeply about their teams, is that delegation is rarely about tasks. It's almost always about leadership development, even when no one is calling it that. It's about how leaders see their own role, how they see their team, and honestly, how comfortable they are with releasing control in small ways every single day. And that's usually where things start to get a little complicated. Most leaders don't resist delegation because they don't understand it. They resist it because of fear, habit, or their identity. And sometimes it might even be all three at the same time. There's this fear that it just won't get done the way that you would do it, or that it will just take longer to explain than to handle it yourself. And so it becomes a habit of being the fixer, the one that everyone comes to when things start to go sideways. And then there's the identity piece, which is, I think, the part that we don't talk about enough. For a lot of leaders, being competent, reliable, and quite frankly, being needed is part of how they have learned to measure their value. So when someone says you should delegate more, what that sounds like to them underneath the surface is to stop being useful. Even if that's not what the person saying that to you is intending. That's why delegation advice oftentimes just kind of falls on deaf ears, because it skips over the emotional side of delegation completely. There are also a lot of myths about delegation that leaders can quietly carry around with them. Things like, it's just faster if I do it myself, or, oh, they're not ready yet. And some leaders even feel like delegation means that you're losing control. And sometimes those thoughts feel very logical in the moment, especially when things are busy or when the stakes are high. But what I've seen is that those beliefs usually keep leaders operating from a place of overload more than they realize. And over time, that can actually limit the growth of the team. One of the clearest signs that delegation isn't working well is when everything still runs through you as a leader. All the decisions, approvals, questions, even the small things that technically don't need your involvement, but somehow they always seem to land in your plate. And at first, that can feel like leadership, right? It can feel like you're staying connected. It can feel like you're being supportive of your team. But over time, what you're creating is a bottleneck, even when that's not your intention. You become the bottleneck, and your team feels that. When delegation isn't clear or consistent for that matter, people will hesitate. They second guess themselves, they wait for approval instead of taking on ownership of whatever the task is. And then you as a leader look around and think to yourself, why isn't anyone stepping up? What you don't realize is that the system that you've created has taught your team to rely on you. And in, on the contrary, when delegation is done well, it feels very, very different. There's this clarity around what is being handed off and why. There's a space for learning without this fear of punishment looming over people's heads. There's accountability, but then it's paired with trust, so that you're not hovering, you're not micromanaging. And most importantly, there is a shared understanding of what success really looks like. This is where I often talk with leaders about being more intentional in how they decide what it is that they want to delegate, what they should stay involved in, and what they truly need to hold on to, because not everything should be delegated. At the same time, not everything should stay with you. The work is in discerning the difference, especially if you want delegation to develop people instead of you just offloading tasks off of your own to-do list. Delegating to develop people means that you are paying attention to readiness, capacity, and growth, not just who has the time, right? It means sometimes staying involved a little bit longer than feels efficient so that someone else can learn, instead of you just kind of dumping it on someone, or stepping back too soon, or never stepping back at all on the flip side of that. Right? And all of that takes patience, especially for leaders who are already stretched thin. Now, communication matters here more than most leaders realize. So before delegating, people need to understand why the task matters, what success looks like, and how much authority they actually have. Without that clarity, delegation can feel like you've just abandoned them instead of support. Again, even when your intention as a leader is good. So defining success is part of delegation. It's part of care. It gives people something really solid and concrete that they can aim for. And as a result, that reduces the anxiety that can come from having to guess whether they're doing something right or not. It also allows you as a leader to step out of the place of micromanaging without stepping out of accountability. Right? Just because you're able to release and not manage doesn't mean, not micromanage, that doesn't mean that accountability just falls by the wayside. When delegation starts working the way it's meant to, something shifts. The trust in the team deepens. You expand the capacity of not only yourself, but your team. And you as a leader stop carrying everything yourself. That's when the team starts to build confidence in their own judgment and their own ability. And over time, delegation becomes less about release and more about rhythm. And I want to say this clearly because it really matters. Delegation is a leadership muscle. It strengthens as you use it. Now, this is not about perfection, right? You don't have to get it perfect. Matter of fact, you probably won't the majority of the time, right? You don't have to hand everything off all at one time. What I'm wanting you to do here is to be willing to practice, to notice where you're holding on to things out of habit instead of being intentional with it, and to take those small steps toward creating shared ownership within the team. Now, if you're listening to this and you're realizing that delegation has been harder for you than it really needs to be, or that your team is relying on you more than they should, or maybe even that things feel stuck, even though everyone is capable, this is exactly the kind of pattern that I work with inside of teams. The Teamwork Tune-Up is a structured way to help teams clarify ownership, strengthen communication, and to rebuild trust so that delegation doesn't feel like a constant struggle or some sort of personal risk. It gives leaders and teams a shared language, clearer expectations, and systems that support development instead of dependency. Now, you can learn more about the Teamwork Tune-Up and explore how to bring me in to work with your team using the link inside of my show notes. Leadership is not about carrying everything yourself. It's about creating the conditions where other people can step into ownership and do that with confidence. And that takes practice. It takes patience. And it takes a willingness to let leadership evolve instead of just staying the same because it simply feels familiar. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, lead well and live well.